Welcome to a special edition of DC Comics News Podcast Network. I am your host, Seth Singleton, and I am lucky enough to be sitting down with the creators of The Last Amazon. Who would that be? Well, I have both Jamison Stone and David Ferreira. I'm going to let them introduce themselves and say a quick hello. And then we have a lot of questions about a project I know you're going to want to hear more about. Jamison, let's start with you. How are you today, sir?
Oh, I'm doing fabulous. I get to talk about sci-fi, post-apocalyptic stories. There's nothing better.
Oh, yeah, and on a Thursday. Like, not
And on a Thursday.
that coming on a Thursday. Like, you gotta love that kind of thing. If you could give us just a little bit of background, I mentioned The Last Amazon. Is this your first project? Just a little bit of quick intro.
My first graphic novel, second published work. My first was Rune of the Apprentice, an epic fantasy sci-fi novel that came out in 2016. But yeah, this is my first graphic novel, and we were super excited to do it with my co-creator and artist, David.
Which is a perfect setup to introduce Mr. David Ferreira. David, how are you today, sir?
Doing really well.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us from a beautiful location. I won't share your location yet, but I will let you, as you choose, to disclose it. As far as yourself, just a quick, brief recap. Was this your first project?
Yes, as a published graphic novel, yes, was my first. And I was before that, I was kind of doing portfolio pieces and working kind of as a freelancer for many rappers in Paris. Once I met Jamison, we started to work more towards publishing the graphic novel, for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, the best part about this conversation is that you're not just going to listen to me asking questions. I'm joined by the always amazing Miss Kendra Hale. Kendra, how are you?
I am absolutely fabulous this morning. I have my coffee. I got to reread this absolutely astounding, groundbreaking, unique book last night. I'm ready for this. This is an amazing experience. Good morning, Thursday.
I like Well, let's hear it for that Good Morning Thursday. In fact, Kendra, I'm going to let you go ahead and kick us off with the first round of questions this time. So, what's your first question for the group? For Jamison, for David, however you want to do it.
Well, I mean, honestly, let's just kick it off with one for both of you. Let's start out with the basics. What is The Last Amazon?
Absolutely. So, set in the year 2050, after a worldwide nuclear holocaust in 2025, two factions in Hawaii and Denver come together to fight and battle over the few remaining habitable zones in our kind of war-torn world. A desperate scientist based out of Hawaii that have rebranded themselves the Azores Islands awakens a sentient technology and AI that can either plunge the entire planet into eternal darkness or tip the tides of battle between this Cold War and hopefully save everyone from World War IV. That is The Last Amazon in a nutshell, at least.
That's a tiny little nutshell.
I can go into so much more detail. Yeah, ask me anything you want to know, and I'd love to share. But I always try not to be too verbose. So yeah, ask and you shall receive.
Well, see, and I'm a spoiler-free reviewer, so I'm used to not asking super details. We don't want to give away the plot or any of the big devices that make this book so amazing. We want people to go out and read it because it's absolutely worth it.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, David and I had such a labor of love to be able to bring this photorealistic art style and mix it into the written word. We decided to try and write this book from many different divergent points of view. So we have news articles, blog posts, we have social media posts, hacked government files, you name it. We have our version of kind of neo-anonymous giving online rants. And so to have all of these different perspectives come together, trying to tell this meta story of what was happening currently in 2050, while also retrospectively trying to look back and piece together what caused the nuclear holocaust in 2025. Yeah, working with David was really amazing. He was able to bring his just supreme artistic skill together to not only have this just stunning photorealistic style, but to be also able to master all of these different artistic perspectives. So blog posts, Instagram posts, all of these things kind of woven together. Yeah, what was it like for you, David, to be able to actually, have all of these different styles come together in one cohesive book?
One of the main themes that comes back, and I kind of start seeing our like current and future projects. It's really that we want to keep the reading fresh in a certain way. And I remember we were discussing this to do the different styles, not having the same kind of the same graphic assets, let's say, in each chapter. And how can a book look with multiple styles? For instance, the one that strikes me the most, it's the Denver section, where we are kind of showing this revolutionary style, and we took reference from those old newspapers from the Revolution, and that was a way of us like keeping every chapter fresh and feel unique, and it also helped for how the story could flow. So yeah, that's one of the concepts that I'm super proud of with this book and with the work that we were able to make with this.
Yeah, it was so fun to be able to take kind of the Che Guevara, kind of
yeah, exactly.
Viva la Revolution style, and then be able to update that for what we were then calling the Denver denizens. And so this is kind of all of Colorado, which was one of the few places that were spared during the nuclear attack. They banded together with the rest of the remaining, population from the United States, and really tried to kind of create a new post-apocalyptic society, not one based in chaos. And that group, the Denver denizens, then were locked in this Cold War with the Azores Islands, the Hawaiian Islands, and the remainder of the Pacific Fleet from the kind of defunct United States government at that point. And to have kind of this neo Tokyo meets sci-fi kind of Blade Runner within Hawaii, with this very gritty, revolutionary, almost like socialism, communism, while still being grounded in American freedom for the Denver denizens, and have those two styles be totally divergent and yet occupying the same book. It was a lot of fun to work on.
Certainly sounds like it. I mean, the thing that really sticks with me is the fact that when I first started looking through it, there was a lot for me to process, and I love some of the descriptions you've been providing, like the meta story and the photorealism. What was the genesis of this project? Because I know it came from somewhere, but did it start with one? Did it start with the other? Did the two of you, where did this all begin?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I ask myself when I'm able to log on my computer.
How did I
get
here?
Yeah, exactly. How did this all happen? Mainly, that's when I work with David and I see his amazing art, and I just say, God, how am I able to partner with this guy? I'm so lucky. It actually started Apotheosis Studios, which is our indie studio. This is probably 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago now. We were looking for a lead artist, and David Granjo actually sent us a message around the importance of not copying other people's work. Do you remember this story, David?
Yeah.
Yes, he does. Yes. I'm sure David's face is getting a little red right now.
Totally.
Listeners at home, you can't see it, but I know it's there, even in France. David pressed upon us the importance of crediting our artists, and we had contracted with actually a very, I won't say his name, but a very, very well-known and popular artist out of China. Amazing guy. we were using some of his artist placeholder art while we were looking for a full-time artist and a lead artist and art director. And through the beauty of the internet, David and I started talking. And by the end of it, David asked for a job, and I said, "Well, all right, show me your portfolio, and we'll see what we're looking at." And I saw some of the best art that I'd ever seen come out of a relatively undiscovered artist. And kind of the rest is history. We were able to take those art assets, and I already had a pre-existing story based in our kind of Rune Chronicles universe, which is the flagship IP of Apotheosis Studios. And we were able to work together to create this just really bizarre sci-fi book that is The Last Amazon. No one else had really done anything quite like that. One, because it's kind of insane and way too much work than it's worth, but I think it came out well.
Yeah, I also remember that because of the style, we really wanted to avoid being a traditional comic book, and bringing up the style with all the format of another author called Dan Lugigi, and he has a book called Last Man Standing, and it's kind of the same. It's like a superhero that has this journal with all his enemies and allies, and I was super impressed with that idea, and I was like, how can we push this concept forward? And then when I heard from him for a long time. And then when me and Jamison met, we were like thinking, okay, we don't want to make like the traditional route. How can we like make this feel more unique? I was like, oh, there's this book, and we kind of took from that. That was one of the inspirations that we had. Then at least that kickstarted the project, and then I think it was really something as a solo freelancer, learning teamwork and feedback and like how ideas evolve inside a team. It was super interesting and super important to now leveraging that experience in other projects. It's really valuable.
Yeah, and now David is training up other artists inside of our studio. So we were able to go just basically for that particular project, Last Amazon, a 2-person team, into now we have about 8 or 9 people on our current book called The Red Opera RPG, which is a 5th edition RPG campaign and setting, which we're very excited about. But it all started with two guys kind of trying to do something unique and different, and making a crazy book.
And yet at the same time, it's a book that is, I mean, for all its craziness, it's appropriate in that it's kind of talking about a crazy world. This was a story that I found myself working so hard to track as I was following it along and going, okay, I'm keeping up. Right. Do I need to go back and read some sections? Probably do. And for my benefit, as I discovered just all of these, this world that you're presented with, the viewpoint that you're given, which is a really interesting presentation of dialogue and a great way to kind of create an environment through this gradual world building process, which I loved. I'm going to continue on with that. But since I just asked the last question, Kendra, I'm turning it back over to you.
Thanks. But I mean, to be fair, there is so much that goes into this, and you guys have already started to brush the surface. I mean, you have all of these aspects, and I mean, honestly, it feels like as a reader, from that standpoint, you see gaming aspects, you see anime aspects, you see all of these lovely little, I don't know if they were meant to be Easter eggs, but they sure feel like them.
Oh, I love Easter eggs so very much. That's what like gets me up in the morning. And we've hidden I'm a huge. We're both, Dave and I are both huge gamers. So we've hidden video game references, actual computer code from mods from Skyrim. Like everything's in there. We have stuff for programmers. So if for computer science architects, they will actually be able to go through, read our code, and there's hidden jokes that only a programmer would understand. We have other things that only physicists would understand. A lot of like little puns, particularly when you have an AI. So one of our main characters, really our kind of player protagonist, The character's name is Lex, and she's an artificial intelligence, and you're introduced to her really in the very first page of the book. She doesn't speak both to the reader or to the other characters in a standard way, and has to kind of learn how to interact with her world. And you, the reader, you learn along with her. It's a nice little storytelling device that a lot of writers use for good reason, but we try to do it a little bit differently, and we were able to hide so many fun things. One of my favorites was definitely some of the Skyrim quotes from some of my favorite mods.
I think once we had the first, we were like, okay, let's do more of these, and we had like a week dedicated to Easter eggs.
Yeah,
they are gorgeous. I mean, and I love that it's so like you guys said it in the special features in the book, and I want to go ahead and just let you know that you succeeded. You said it in the special features that this wasn't something you wanted to be the normal book or a normal graphic novel. You didn't want atypical. And this is The Last Amazon is so far away from the typical. It is a wonderful piece. You guys bring up that there's aspects for pretty much any genre of reader. I mean, you could step into this from any avenue as a new fan, as a fan of old graphic novels, new graphic novels, books in general, or even gaming and anime. And one of my favorite, and I have to know, so here's my question. When you bring in the Reign of Salvation, which I'm not going to give away any of that, but when you bring that in, there's this part during the third week of fighting where Castle Rock is introduced. And I know that it doesn't play a huge part, but is there any bit of that is an homage to Stephen King's Castle Rock?
So I have a huge smile on my face right now. You can't see it. That's all I'm going to say. I have a huge smile on my face. And all I can say is thank you so much to the discerning reader that you are for being able to notice the things that we so lovingly planted inside this book. Thank you.
That's what I do, but thank you. No, I saw that and I was like, there's no way. But I was like, every bit of this as I was going through, I have like 16 pages of notes. I'm like, okay, that one caught me. That one, and I know Seth probably caught this one too. It was later in the book, but there was a line on Danny, which we'll get to, Danny Winter's Hey Blue page. And it was to a Wade Wilson.
Oh yes, the Deadpool.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Things like that make a book so immersive, and it really is a pleasure. So thank you guys for including these little Easter eggs, because they are a joy when they pop.
Oh, excellent.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with it. I mean, at the end of the day, when you have a graphic novel with a gun-toting, cyborg superhero woman who, decimates cities, you can't take yourselves too seriously. And so you got to have fun with it. Otherwise, it's like, it's kind of like, what do we do with our lives? We got to have fun. And by kind of stepping into that like satirical role and having it be like meta modern, we were then able to actually hopefully point at some real issues that, depending on kind of where things go in our actual country now, like we're kind of facing. And so we want to try to look at that from a lens from an like artistic perspective, and that some people don't have to read into it that deep too. And they can even just treat it as an art book. And as the writer, like kind of breaks my heart a little bit, but you know what, like there are a lot of people that just want to see amazing art, and we wanted to showcase that as well. And, having some of the pages are just, like 5 pages in a row of David's just stellar full page art. And that works, and it works beautifully, and it draws people into this kind of, gaming aspect where we have some like, first person perspectives like a la Call of Duty and other FPS genres. And then, like beautiful portraits kind of in much more like anime, photorealistic style. So yeah, we wanted to make it approachable for everybody.
Success, 100%. The gamer in me, the anime fan, the reader, loved every bit of it. Seth, what about you?
Awesome.
Well, thank you, Kendra. Yeah, I love the Easter eggs. I mean, I smiled, and I think it was somewhere around like the last 40 pages with a impressive, most impressive. And I thought to myself, oh, okay, so we're dropping a little Vader in here. Is this for the old guys? Okay, well, the old guys smile and wave and say thank you. So yes, the discerning reader in both of us was looking for and enjoying these things that we discovered. I mean, the fact that you took at least four major corporations and turned their name into something that sounds like Loch Ness Monster for me. So yeah, I knew there were times you guys were totally playing with us, and I was like, oh, okay. So we're telling a post-apocalyptic story, but at the same time, we're doing it with our tongue in our cheek, and we're not guaranteeing we're removing it at any moment whatsoever. I wanted to talk about something kind of fun. I keep writing notes to myself, and then at some point, the next note that I make becomes the superseding one. But as I was looking at the photorealistic style, I just wanted to ask a fun question about what your process was for creating these, and if you were using any, say, behind-the-scenes figures at either Apotheosis Studios or elsewhere to create some of the very real looking people in these images. Were these
absolutely
friends of family, people who you worked with, guys who you were just like, you come here, we're gonna take your picture? Shit, don't worry, we got it covered, it doesn't matter.
Totally. So I'll speak to some of the amazing talent that we worked with, and then David will be able to talk about how he actually pulled it off, because that's just David Granjo. But I can talk about some of the people that we worked with. So we wanted to be able to try and like break that fourth wall in kind of fandom culture, particularly around cosplay culture, by casting, relatively well-known Instagram models who were also, gamers and cosplayers and huge into the Comic-Con scene, which we both are. And have them really be part of the book. So we had such luminaries as Lauren Drain Kagan, Darth Lexi, Woe Nerd Alert, and numerous others actually starring as these characters, and we were able to work with them. It was a real pleasure to actually have them help us in some regards shape their characters a little bit. And we would take photos, either photos that they had had taken previously, or actually gave them direction of, this is the pose that we need, this is the lighting that we need, and then David was able to really work his magic. And I'll let you David, talk about that, because it's not something that I can do.
It's the process of I was also still learning that process, because there's an actual when I started to do the first images before meeting with Jamison, before starting, I was really trying to improve into that style, which is a style called photo bashing. So it's the process of sketching the fundamentals of art, like composition, the pose, the light, figuring all of that, and then going to our good friend Google and find the right images and kind of make a collage in top of that composition. And this is a really simple of putting this process, but it comes with these challenges. But it was really fun going through the Instagram, like, okay, let me see from 10 years ago a photo that she has that has the light that I want, the pose that I want, the expression that I want. And it was challenging, but really an amazing learning process.
Yeah. And to feel their enthusiasm for some of these Instagram models, where really it's impossible for anyone, unless you're a superstar movie actor or actress, to be featured in a graphic novel like this. It was so awesome to see like the joy that they had of being literally on the cover of this this graphic novel, this hardbound art book, and it was a real pleasure to work with them on this project.
You gotta love when they bring that kind of enthusiasm, right? Like you're you're asking something and they're like, oh yeah, and look what else I brought, and you're thinking to yourself, I'm immensely thankful right now. Like the
Exactly.
fact that any time is able to meet, match, or exceed your energy when you're approaching a project. That's just a gift that you can't always depend on, but you can hope for when you get it, man. I can only imagine. I'm gonna pump the brakes on what I imagine would probably have been like 3 follow-up questions because I'll just jot them down and say, Kendra, you're up next.
All right. I mean, I'm with you, Seth. This is so hard to not like rapid fire questions. But
Or have a ping pong brain because that's what mine is, like ping pong ball, blah blah blah. Or
It's
Right,
good.
it's
Fire,
like-
fire away. We love it. We love it. Fire away.
well, I mean, I think that with this, I mean, you explained a lot about the art styling and where a lot of the inspiration comes from. And I mean, it's a wonderful journey getting to watch the 2 main ones, at least in the beginning, watching Red and Lex trying to restore her memory through seeing, all of this different information. And it's not only believable, but it's done so incredibly well. You get to see all aspects of it, from little website blurbs about what the Amazons are to, just like social media posts with little hints like Stan Lee in them as commenters.
Yep.
And I think that the biggest thing is because there's a mirror that, at least for me, was able to be seen. And I'm sure Seth and anyone who's read it has seen it as well. But some of these comments, I mean, they do mirror some of the arguments that we see today that are going on. Were there any inspirations that you pulled from right now that went into this book to kind of mirror what we're facing now?
100%. And I had to, when I was drafting out a lot of those comments, I had to dial myself back and tone it down so much and edit to kind of make sure that we weren't going too overboard with a lot of those comments, and not make the book too like overtly political or too too aggressive in that stance, and trying to have it be a bit of like a bit moderated insofar as not pushing too hard. I as a writer, I like to try and, I don't know, like, let's change the world through the written word, and constantly having to dial back. And honestly, David was really helpful for me in that way, and be like, yes, this is a great article, and now we need to rewrite it so it's not so very aggressive. And that's that's teamwork, and that's what it's like to have a creative partner and a co-creator on a project where you have someone that can see you so clearly and see your gifts and see your challenges. And so many times, and I think that you guys as readers will hopefully appreciate this, David would say, wow, this is such a great section. Now let's make it half as long. And I would have to go in and I'd edit it down. And that editorial process is so important. So we then only have like the gold and the jewels left. And we were able to cut out all the silver, cut out all the bronze, and hopefully I got the lead out on my own. And then, through that teamwork and collaboration, we were able to then come with something that it was really refined and distilled down to the greatest possibility of what it could be.
If I'm going to speak for myself, but I could have had you guys go for another like 40 pages and I'd have been just fine.
Excellent. Well, sequels. Then that's where it'll come in, is for a sequel.
Yeah, and you never know. You could always have another bound, section with the stuff that was like, hey, you want to see the unedited, the original?
We have one
There's
on our
a market
website.
for that.
We do. We actually, so part of our marketing campaign involved a satirical and sadly satirical article of the president tearing down the Statue of Liberty, and that was one of the articles that didn't actually make it into the book. We have images of it in the book, but we actually have that entire article is on our website. And I think if you just Google, just into Google, President tears, removes Statue of Liberty, our website will pop up, and it's a satirical article of that. And so we tried to kind of have that again, like that meta modern, breaking that fourth wall of having some of those news articles actually up, like in real life, and not just only in the book.
That's awesome. I love the fact that, even though some of these didn't make it into the final version of the book, they still found a place. And one of those was this great project that you're describing that was used for the website. And like you said, just type into Google President tearing down the Statue of Liberty, because I will be. Otherwise, I do it now and I don't want to disrupt our signal. But guarantee you me, that will be a search when I get off the the call today.
And for folks who enjoy kind of some behind the scenes stuff, there's actually some information around the precursors to what the Amazons became into. I'm trying to remember the exact name. It's discussed in that article and in the book, but talking about them being deployed in greater detail. So there's like actually more information about the book and what the Amazons later were based off of, which is kind of cool too. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to remind you and us at the end to have you give that website again, just because people's brains are probably still processing everything we're describing so far. And if they haven't had a chance to look at what we've seen, then they're really working hard. We're going to keep on painting a bigger picture. Kendra, remind me, is it to you or back to me? I can't remember now. Who asked the last question?
I did, so it's your turn.
I'm up? Okay. In which case, I want to have some fun. Jamison, you're talking to two writers here who love doing our thing on the side and love great characters. And I'd love the chance now to talk about the fact that we get an introduction to all of our characters and then realize there's a connection between all three of them. But we get this great introduction to two of them. And the format that we do it, you've already sort of introduced this idea of how Lex and Red communicate using programming language and a combination of what we might, recognize as written English mixed with the programming. But it's these two characters who we start off with, and together we learn about a third. And it's those characters I'd love to hear more about right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as we mentioned earlier, the book itself is set through all of these very divergent perspectives. And as we were going during our kind of early editorial phase, and looking at how we want to tell this story, and it was chaotic and just all over the place at first, which is very common when you're really storyboarding something out. And I think we go into this into the making of, which is featured in the digital version, and David shares the actual storyboards of how the original story, and as it transitioned over time, we decided that we needed to be able to weave a thread through all of these kind of narrative devices. And that common thread was this relationship and this dialogue between the Lex and Red character. And so it was really, 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 I think, helpful both for us as we were creating the story and then eventually for the reader, for the finished product, to have these two characters and their relationship as kind of like a home base to be able to come back to. So even if you read this, like, one of the articles is a Twitch stream by a Twitch streamer who's in the, part of the Denver Denizens, and then his stream gets hacked by the, Azores Islands, and then, it's, kind of chaos ensues. Like, how do you place that in the greater context of the emotive relationship, which, when you write a book is what we're all looking for, is these, human connections, even if they're non-human, they can be AI or whatever, to be able to come home to and to be able to then develop a relationship. And so it was super, super fascinating to be able to weave that thread throughout the entirety of the story, and then eventually have a payoff of the reader being able to understand kind of what their backstories are too, and how they're related, and how they're then related to the greater world as well.
Yeah, I remember like our first version was like just the articles split on each other, and by reading the articles, it was kind of a magazine per se, a tech magazine. And then when the character Lex came up, we're like, oh, she can be the thread to put all the articles together. I remember that. That's it, and that's what I love about and learn mostly about teamwork. Was really like, one has an idea and then the other builds on it, and then the other builds on it, and it goes. It was a really dynamic process. We didn't have like a blueprint for making this book. It was kind of funny.
But I love the concept of home base. That takes me back to being just, a little kid playing games. You always had a home base. You always had that, kind of safe thing to return to. And by using Rex and Led to create that, you really not only make their relationship, but both of these characters a foundation for the entire book. And David, I loved what you called it, a thread, this really important thread that was able to take this tech magazine idea and then weave it together, which, I mean, if you're using threads, it's better to get a weave than a tangle, right?
100%. Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's hard to weave and it's easy to tangle.
Right.
I think the metaphor Jamison used at the time, I still remember, is like, it was like, so what we have right now, it's like clothing hanging in the air. We need the thread to hold that cloth, to hold all of the clothes. Lex is that. It's that thread.
Yeah, I'm getting an image of every cartoon moment I have of someone creating clothes in a cartoon using the needle, and it was like the clothing would go up in the air and the pieces would just sort of come magically, and then the thread would just sort of, and then it's like It falls to the ground perfectly made. That's a great image.
Writing was that easy.
Right, because no one knows how many edits it took to get to the version that we thankfully got a chance to see. And those storyboard sections you were talking about, that was such a treat for me. Like I realized, I was like, oh, it's over? There's more pages. Oh, this is nice. Zoom. Oh, and that's so much fun. I love that storyboard creation process, and the way you describe the collaboration so far. It sounds like this project was something that was really a labor of love. That was, the two of you working with each other, working with others, and just saying, okay, what can we each do? How are we building this together? And in so many ways, you were able to provide those key or critical components to make this come together.
Totally. In the words of Cartoon Network, I laughed, I cried, and I spilled apple juice on my carpet. We did it all.
Yeah, and the best thing is you never cry over spilled apple juice. Milk maybe, but never over spilled apple.
Very true. Very true.
Kendra, you've got the next question. Thanks, guys. That was some fun answers.
I'm trying to figure out what one I want to ask next because there's so much in my notes. But I think the question that I would want to know the answer to the most is you get to see this beautiful buildup between Red and Lex as she's recalling her memories. And the really cool thing about this is it is exactly like a video game. You get to see at the bottom part of the screen where we have, or, well, not the screen, but of the book, forgive me. On mine it was a screen because I was reading the digital version. But you get to see her, her infection rate, her memory, what her percentage is. So it's almost exactly like you're leveling through a game as you get closer and closer to her remembering everything that has happened to her. And I guess the biggest question that I have is, how did you know how to pace that to make it to where it was going to fit your needs for what information you wanted to get out to readers before everything hit?
So David has a really amazing ability of being able to do storytelling visually. And so as a writer, I use words, right? And I can offer suggestions and directions to David and the rest of the art team at Apotheosis Studios. But the ability to take an idea and to tell a story and to show evolution and to show progression and degradation in this case for the AI through a visual setting is truly fantastic. And David, please speak to that.
I think for the progression of that, I'm trying to recall that time. I think it was really once we had the story, most of the articles in place, at least ordered in the right way, because they were all over the place with the first versions.
Moving around. It was exactly like a puzzle, and we were trying to make all the pieces fit. And
once we had everything kind of organized, we added the memory bar. or like, okay, how much of this article she can recall, like 10%. Okay, here she will be at 15 or 25. And then in each one, until the climax of the story, she has to reach 100%. And we kind of pace it out thanks to the storyboard. That's why I think in the storyboard was such a key element for us to be able to put all the information, because I think it was like we had an idea that would go through all the book, that was constantly like the memory or all the graphics that we see in Lex UI. We were like, okay, for memory, we have to go through all the book to see how memory will be affected. For corruption, we go through all the book to see how corruption is affected. So each element that we were adding, we had to go through the full book each time to see how that element would be affected, including the Easter eggs and all of that stuff.
I'm loving these answers. I mean, you guys, like I said, and I know I keep repeating myself, but this book is so unique. I mean,
thank you. Truly, thank you.
Thank you.
You know,
thank you.
We took a huge risk to make something like this. Again, you know, Dan Levici's Last Man Standing is the closest thing that I think anyone has ever really done that's quite like this. And we drew huge inspiration. And for any of your listeners that haven't checked out his work, Last Man Standing is really fantastic, and he's an amazing artist. And I would highly encourage people to take a look at his work. It was scary, just to be very honest, for us to work on this as an indie team. But seeing this vision and trying to say, like, you know what, we want to try something different, and we want it to be unique, and we know that we may not get it exactly right. Because it is so radically bizarre and different, but it's worth trying. And even if we don't nail like a bullseye, I think if we hit the target, it'll be a radically new and different target and worth the 2.5 years, however long it took for us to make this book. So thank you. It's a long way of saying I am so appreciative that you see it, yeah, and see what we're trying to do.
That's okay. We also know that you rely on David for some of the editing process too, and I'm not expecting him to just cut you off halfway through a great explanation like that, man. So no worries there. I was curious too, Kendra, am I cool to jump in? Did you get your question?
No, you're good. You're good. Jump. Okay. Be froggy, leap.
You know what I love about something you just said, Jamison, was the idea of risk. And even though you just sort of pared it down, I'm going to ask you to pick all that back up again, because I want to take that same idea about risk now and turn it to what would be another home base in regards to this project, which is Apotheosis Studios. If you can tell us a little bit about what that sort of stance meant to them and how they're able to support you in this process. Who is Apotheosis Studios that's helping you take this risk and
totally
they support you during this project? Because much like Lex and Red, they're your home base, right?
Totally, 100%. So I, being the founder and creator of Apotheosis Studios, I started this in my early 20s, just wanting to be able to tell stories. I said, hey, I want to basically create a refuge for other artists and writers to come together, work on amazing collaborative projects, and not be bound by some of the corporate machine around risk mitigation. Honestly, a lot of times, larger studios, they themselves have this ideology that they're too big to fail, but only if they produce something that they know will sell really well. And I get it, and I love blockbuster movies, and I love huge, big budget, everything. Some of them I like more than others, but I'm a huge fan and supporter of kind of the mainstream, media machine. I also really love indie stuff. And so I think that that's where a lot of the innovation is coming from, particularly on the indie gaming side. And so we, as time went on and as I got older and dumped more of my own personal capital into it and all of my free time, was able to recruit just some amazing talent, such as David Granjo. We have Carlos, and we have a bunch of other writers now all working together, and now ourselves actually being able to swing at some of these, larger, higher budget, higher caliber projects, and to the point now where I've been doing this full time for about 2.5 years. David is full time. We have our logistics personnel and marketing person, Sarah Urfer. She's full time, and we have a bunch of freelance and other writers and artists as well. Carlos is full time too now. Carlos Ansario. And his work was also featured in The Last Amazon to a much more minor degree. Some of the really beautiful landscape shots he did, and in our upcoming work, The Red Opera RPG, he's featured pretty heavily. While David is still the lead artist and the art director for that project, Carlos is doing really fantastic work. So Apotheosis Studios really is a bunch of nerds, who are very passionate, coming together and trying to really kind of lead that next generation of content creation. I grew up playing video games, reading comics, reading fantasy novels and science fiction novels, and that was my refuge from my troubled childhood. And I wanted to try and offer that to other people, to then also inspire the next generation of writers and storytellers and artists too. And it's my hope that we can do so through really innovative storytelling. That's the hope and the aim, at least.
And Jamison, if I can just take a moment of my own sort of acknowledgement that sometimes I totally blow it. I've been going off of the Skype name, which was David Ferreira, and you correcting me with David Granjo just makes me feel a little bit better about trying to say who it is I'm actually talking to and talking about. And in that moment, I just had to sort of laugh and go, okay. So every once in a while, you're going to make a mistake, and when you get a chance to fix it, it's a great chance to sort of acknowledge who it is that you're actually talking to and talking about. And all of those people who were able to be a part of what you've been doing with Apotheosis Studio now. I have to say, oh, sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, I can speak directly to that. So at the studio, when we make mistakes, it is like a badge of honor for us to own them. And I try to lead by example. David will tell you this. I try to lead by example, and every single time just jump in and say, you know what, this one's on me. And then everybody gets to move on, because it's all good. We all make mistakes every day. I mean, it's like, yeah. Who cares?
Yeah, it's a great moment too, though, just to realize, like, when you're in the moment of doing it, going, I could wait until later when it's smoother, cooler, or I could just say, hey, I just realized I wasn't doing something I wanted to, and from here on out, I'm trying to get it more correctly.
There is nothing cooler than taking responsibility for yourself, my man. That is the coolest thing a person can do, in my opinion.
Well, happy to do so with you on this. You guys are some of the coolest people I've ever had a chance to sit down and talk about writing with. Thank you for the great answer. Thank you for describing what I think is something a lot of people. I remember actually trying to start a business back in like 2007, and I wanted it to be a haven for artists and creatives, and I clearly was not set up to go around it, and the environment I was trying to build from was not stable. But when I heard you describing your goal behind it, I was like, well, somebody else did it, and other people do it. Whenever I hear about someone with that same dream who accomplishes it, I'm always just encouraged and heartened. It was like, okay, so maybe I wasn't one of the ones who was successful in that aspect, but at the time that I was doing it, I wasn't alone. There were other people doing it, and the success of your story is an encouragement and inspiration. It's just a reminder that you're not doing it alone, that there are others out there, and if you're an artist and creator, Apotheosis Studios is one of those places you can consider that is, building with that same idea to be a refuge. And that's a really important message, because I too, I can't deny that I was raised on the mainstream, that I grew up on blockbusters, that I made a reference earlier in this episode to a great, line that was from a huge blockbuster. And yet I've also, am in wholehearted agreement with you about this idea that where the innovation seems to come from are the places where the independence is what allows that innovation to actually flourish and to show more of what's possible, more of what can actually be accomplished. And in doing so, create those changes in the mainstream that we learned to love so much. So I'm really heartened by your story about Apotheosis Studios. I love the fact that you got a chance to share it with us right now. And I have a feeling I might have one or two more follow-up questions on it. But I also know that Kendra is here with me, and I'm sure she has more questions as well. Kendra?
I do, but I was enjoying listening.
You're up.
I mean, it's a very unique. That's my favorite word of the day. That's the drinking game today, is how many times I can say unique. But it is. Both myself and Seth, and honestly, any of the people who would have joined us, any of our colleagues, we all have this lovely, unique view of being able to read something and take it in and to see it for the deeper causes, because that's what we're paid to do, is to look into things a lot more deeper and look beneath the surface. And that's something that your book does. I mean, my favorite part so far has been the level of detail that you guys have to this. I mean, you can definitely tell the passion that every person who contributed had. And I think my question would be, you guys have two very unique things that go into the book. The FSF 50 fighter jet.
Oh, that's Carlos. Yeah, that's a great one. Yep.
Yeah.
That was so cool to see the breakdown, not only on that one, but also back to your guys' Amazons, where you have the brain connection system, and you have this whole display of what the chip is, what it does, how all of the information is supposed to be relayed, not only to those who have purchased the protection, but also back to the main warehouse, so that they have it on file and can go through it. Sort of like a safeguard.
And blackmail you with it too.
Right.
Exactly.
So, I mean, for those two things specifically, I would love to hear more about them.
Totally, absolutely. So we wanted this to feel as real as physically possible. Again, David and I, we just are in love with huge, big AAA video game studios such as Naughty Dog, such as Bethesda, such as Rockstar.
Yes.
They create these worlds, and you are in them, and it makes you question reality. Are we in a simulation? Like, what's the difference? And as a two-person team, we couldn't do that. I hope someday for us to be able to try and swim with those larger fish. But we did what we could with what we had. And so the FFS fighter, the forward swept wing, I think I'd have to look at it again. I instructed Carlos. I said, design us a fighter that we cannot make now. Make something that is impossible to do now with current technology, and make it look really, excuse my profanity, really effing cool. And he came back with these amazing designs for this forward wing fighter. And if you were to fly one of these with steel and normal materials, it would rip apart. Like they've tried them. The military has a couple of them, and they ripped apart. So originally we didn't say make it forward swept, this wing design. That's what he came back with, and he was like, here it is. I go, oh gosh darn, I now have to write about this. I have to now become an expert in this type of fighter jet. And so I then had to carve out basically a whole week of just for that page, learning about forward swept wing alignment and why is it not possible, and how could we make it possible? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? One of the reasons, the torque of when you fly, and the military actually has very extensive information on this, which I read multiple times because it's very confusing. The G-force is too much. People pass out. And obviously a passed out fighter pilot is not a very good fighter pilot. But we have robots flying these things. It's AI. And so we're able to mitigate that. They have new polymers and, nanotech carbon fiber, so they can create these, more sci-fi materials. And then I had probably 4 pages of notes on what I wanted to include. And David Granjo says, this is amazing. And you now get to use 1/10 of it. What's your favorite? And what you see is the 10th. It's the tip of the iceberg. Yeah. So
I remember when we went to that part in terms of the style, I like the comment of how if it was Apple making these robots, how they do present them.
Exactly.
That was kind of the thought behind the really minimalistic thing, and also to make contrast with the other articles that were really populated with art and text. Like, how can we make this like Apple-wise, like minimalistic?
And marketing,
also,
yeah, because they're trying to sell
yeah.
these things. They want you to buy them. Yeah, exactly.
No, you guys succeeded. I mean, it was glorious enough that it stuck with me. It was one of those things where when I was going through it, I was like, okay, everything from the articles to the websites to even the ads were captivating. I was just like, okay, wait a minute, hold up, did we just get an ad in a book?
And the skip, you can skip it if you want.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, that's one of the things that made this book so cool, was it was so immersive, and it was like slice of life. So back to, I mean, it harkens to anime. I mean, you literally got these cool little things. I mean, watching as Lex has to go through and remember everything, you get to see kind of everything that you want your readers to know all at once. And it was a beautiful thing to behold. And that's where I'm going to go ahead and pause, because I have like 2 others going through my head right now. But Seth, it is your turn.
Thank you for that handoff. Yeah, my only addition about that ad was I immediately was taken back to my childhood and reminded of RoboCop, when they would have the commercials that would pop on, and it was like the lady by the pool, and she's putting on SPF 1000 because UV rays are so powerful now, and you don't want your skin to melt off, but you still want to enjoy your time at the pool. And these ad breaks just took me back to that, like, what do future ads look like? And
exactly.
What a great introduction to the world through its marketing. These are supposed to be the things you're either desiring, wanting, or need to know about. So how is it that you as the reader are being informed the same way as someone from that time would be, which was just a masterful touch. I want to take a new question with the idea of something that you mentioned earlier, which is, I always love that great line when they're talking with a famous director who I try not to start using a lot of names because I start flubbing things more than I want to. But if I remember the lines, then it usually is better for me. But they were talking about a series of movies he did, and for each one he kept saying, "Oh, it's about communication." Yep, that one's about communication too, and that one's about communication. No matter what the story is about, in each one it's about communication, which is, I think, a huge part of this book. We talk about the relationship of Red and Lex, and we also have their dialogue. But in it, you'd mentioned something that was really important, which is that it's English language, it's programming. There's also some physics reference in there, and the jokes and the Easter eggs. But I was curious about where you went for the expertise. Are you a programmer or a physicist, or are either of you? Or who do you know who could help you inform that language, because it was so integral to that communication you were developing?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So I would call myself a very bad amateur astrophysicist, which means I enjoy reading books and probably only understand, 20% of what I'm reading, if not less. But as far as for programming, I am not a computer scientist at all. I'm very fortunate to have a very wide network of folks who are computer scientists and physicists and architects and all the rest. And as a writer, I constantly have to, pick up the phone and say, hey, can I take you out to lunch and just ask you questions about X, Y, or Z? It's, people enjoy having their expertise appreciated. And so it just to be so, for me, I'm so grateful to be able to have the opportunity to talk to people who have made it their life's work to become masters of these, different sectors of information, and being able to find the interesting parts of those and put them into sci-fi settings. So yeah, it was really great. And for me, I would usually have a template for particularly some of the physics jokes of this is kind of what I want to do. What do you think? And they'd be like, yeah, that's a good one. I'd be like, here, this is the formula you need to have. One of them, I'll give away one of the Easter eggs just for fun.
Oh yeah.
Is when either Red or Lex says everything's relative, or that's relative, and so we then her response is the theory of relativity, Einstein's theory of relativity. We threw it in there. And just to be able to kind of have this little thing where, a physics major in college or, a professional working in the field would be like, oh my God, like that guy just like flex Einstein? Like what?
That's really awesome. I love the way that it was portrayed in here and who you were able to rely on for the expertise and then building it in as part of the story. That sounds like it was a fun time to just sort of say to somebody, hey, so tell me what you're smart about and how I can use it in this story.
Exactly.
And I can relate to the amateur astrophysicist. One of my favorite things to do while either prepping, I can honestly say for the first like 15 minutes before I was getting ready for this call this morning while I was eating some oatmeal, was watching the NASA channel and just going, oh, that's cute. All right, let's see whatever I can try and glean and then hopefully at some point absorb and turn around into a conversation later. Just feel like I've expanded my base. But knowing you had all those experts to reach out to, that must have been a huge benefit. Has that network increased since this project?
I've had a lot of people, lucky enough for us, I think we did it pretty well. We've not gotten any like critiques, at least on any of that stuff, so that's great. But we've got, I was a little nervous to be honest. But we've had a lot of people reach out and say like, hey, we'd love to just share our expertise. Speaking to what you're saying though about watching the NASA channel, I want to give a shout out to Michio Kaku. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Absolutely amazing author. I have, I think, almost all of his published works. He has done some awesome stuff around kind of physics of the future and taking a look of like how can we make like a laser gun work in real life? Like what about anti-gravity? Is that a thing? How would we do that? So Michio Kaku, for folks who want to do some not so heavy reading, sorry, bad gravity joke, I would definitely check them out. Michio Kaku.
I love that shout out. I will agree with it. Yeah. A master of explaining just how does it work? And what do we need to keep in mind? Like there's the thing we want and then there's how we get it. So thank you, man. That's a great shout out. Kendra, I snuck in a follow-up question, but I'm bringing back around to you.
That means I get 2, right?
Yeah, rock and roll.
You can have as many as you want, Kendra.
See, Jamison's game. Like we're in this.
Well, I mean, you guys are talking about, like Seth, you specifically are talking about watching NASA. I'm over here playing COD, so that's how I prepped for this.
Hey,
wait, are you the one with the gaming sounds in the background? Because someone is trying to make this work too perfectly with that. Where I'm like, how is it we're talking about gaming stuff and there's gaming in the background? Who does that? That's brilliant. Oh, okay.
See, but that's why I was uniquely ready to appreciate the fact that they brought in the Vector SMG into the book.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is my gun.
Yes.
I was so excited. I was like, of
this
all
one's for
the weapons to pick for the Amazons, this is the one.
Yeah. David, tell us. I have lots of thoughts on the Vector, and I love it. Tell us some of your thoughts on the Vector. Why is the Vector a good gun for the Amazons?
I think the researchers that at least I remember the most was because they are better for the SWAT team using the city indoors. I think that was the thought for that gun. But I remember like how are we going to present this? Like Call of Duty menus, let's go.
So one of the beautiful things about the Vector, so we wanted to find a gun that would be as elegant and like technologically savvy and on like technologically innovative as these Amazon, these robotic soldiers. And so with the recoil mitigation of the Vector, there are not many weapons that use that. And I'm not a huge I'm not a proponent of violence, and I consider myself a nonviolent guy. And yet also guns are awesome. I'm sorry, I have to say it. And so we wanted to find something that was, super sexy, like a super sexy gun to be held by a super sexy soldier. And we wanted it to be cutting edge, which the Vector is. I think, I'm not 100% sure. I think that the Vector is designed by a Colorado-based gun manufacturer. I'd have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure. And we're based out of Colorado, so I enjoy kind of shout outs to local folks here. But yeah, and obviously, for a fully, like weaponized robot, like they would have additional armaments, but this is more of their kind of light arm or light fire round, like city clearing stuff.
I have to also say that I'm not a violent person until it comes to rank. And then it's all, everything's fair in love and war once ranked hits.
Totally, yeah, and I, as an avid video gamer myself, strongly do not believe that there's any correlation between video game violence and real life violence. And I like to use myself as a great example of that. Non-violent person, but goddamn, do I like getting headshots in any video game.
Oh, that dopamine.
Kindred
Exactly.
spirit. Yes. That makes me so gleeful. All right, my next one would be, at the very end of the book, we get a sneak peek of kind of what's to come next. And it's this beautiful shot of Shadow of the Moon.
Oh.
I would love to hear more. So please dish.
So Shadow of the Moon is really going to be our flagship work. Again, currently we're working on this book called The Red Opera RPG. It launches September 1st on Kickstarter. And so our attention has been on that for probably the past several months. We've been working 5 months full time working on that. But before we decided to take that project, we had been working exclusively on Shadow of the Moon. And when the Red Opera RPG is concluded, we will then return back to Shadow of the Moon full time. So we've actually created for Shadow of the Moon an entire city, which is fully 3D rendered. Setting it up to eventually turn it into a video game. Now, we don't have the funds and we don't have the team personnel yet to do a fully fleshed out video game. However, we're designing Shadow of the Moon as a graphic novel first, much like The Last Amazon, although the storytelling will be different. It won't be done in the form of news articles and things like that, because it's sent in much more of a fantasy sci-fi setting. But the level of attention to detail of the quality of art and writing as well is that which you would find in a AAA blockbuster video game. So the story is set within the Rune Chronicles, which is in the same kind of timeline and universe as my first novel called Rune of the Apprentice. And Shadow of the Moon follows this character, and her name is Zara. He's kind of your standard, at least on the surface, seems to be your kind of standard run-of-the-mill princess. That story's been told, and so we use that as a little bit of a foil to then kind of tell this greater story around, society, the machinations of war, mental disorder, and her own descent into madness, trying to come to terms and deal with some very traumatic experiences that she's had surrounding around the kidnapping of her sister, and her having to reclaim her own power through this process of going and getting her sister. Now, as an avid video game player, this is something you'll appreciate. How this book and eventual video game is set up, every night she has these reoccurring dreams, and they're set in this location called Tetragar Tower. And Tetragar Tower is very far away in the world of Terra, this sci-fi place where the story is set. And she's having these reoccurring nightmares, really, of having to go and rescue her sister. Now, at first, she's this, 17-year-old girl wearing a camisole, that enters into this tower's gates. She's just in her nightgown, really. She gets slaughtered instantly, horribly, brutally slaughtered. And she wakes up in her bed. Next night, exact same thing happens again. Well, eventually, she starts to learn how to fight. And she gets indoctrinated into this kind of behind-the-scenes AI training platform that's called The Shadow of the Moon, and it has to do with the greater story of this world in the Rune Chronicles. And they teach her how to become this very stealthy assassin. And much like a video game where you live, you do your thing, and then you die, and then you try again, she, through subsequent deaths, and we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of deaths, hones her body, kind of a la Matrix style, into this killing machine to go and rescue her sister, who's being held captive at the top of this tower. Again, another video game trope, but it's not as simple as one would be led to believe around that. This is not, sorry Mario, your princess is in another castle type situation. The story has much more to do with her own psychological transformation, dealing with her own trauma. And I don't want to give any spoilers away, but I can't even tell you how excited both myself as the lead writer and director, David Granjo as art director, and Carlos and the rest of our team are about this project. I think that we're really going to turn a lot of heads, and I think that people are going to really, really, really appreciate what we've done here. We're taking a lot of risks on it too, diving into some mental disorders and some psychological trauma, and as an indie studio, trying to do something really unique while also paying homage to the meta genre that is video games, and blending that first into a graphic novel, and then bringing it to Kickstarter to hopefully make I can't say it'll be AAA just because those are, they're like $100 million budgets, but through utilizing cutting edge technology, making what would be a AAA indie video game. We're very excited about it.
And you've got me, so I'm going to have to start watching, because that was not what I expected, and now I'm even more excited. That is an excellent story. So she has to relive day in and day out the same dream. It's kind of like, what's that movie? Seth, maybe Happy Death Day? Where they have to keep reliving it to figure out why they're dying.
Yeah, Happy Death Day. It gives me I go back to Groundhog Day with Bill Murray.
Yep, Bill Murray. Amazing movie. Amazing movie.
Sorry, I'm more of the horror buff than the comedian, so.
Hey, that's okay. And actually, I never saw Happy Death Day. My wife.
I haven't either. I gotta check it out.
Yeah,
it's great.
I've only heard good things. Like, she really got a kick out of the concept, and basically, she has to solve her own murder, kind of a concept, I believe, or something like that.
And then every time she dies, she wakes right back up in the same day. So it's exactly like the premise of Groundhog's Day.
Nice, yeah. And for me, Groundhog's Day was just. That's a pretty seminal work. You know what I mean? Like they did something there, and it's hard to match it. All at some point you can do is just sort of reinterpret it with a new twist, or lend some credence to like the idea that you're like, okay, this is my take on that concept. But man, I challenge anyone to try and redo.
and one could never go toe to toe with Bill Murray. What it just is impossible. The man is just, he's legend. It's just absolute legend. One of the things that we were really trying to tackle, and are still in the process of tackling, because this project is far from completed, with Shadow of the Moon, is balancing these reoccurring nightmares, and that's more of the battle sequence of the game. So you are able to have your, what in video game terms they call your core gameplay loop, and that's the part of Call of Duty where you throw a grenade, rush in, shoot your SMG, get a kill, and then regroup with your team. They'd call that your gameplay loop, your core gameplay loop. So for our game, and again, it'll first be visualized in a graphic novel, a la Last Amazon, you'll have that core gameplay loop, but the vast majority of the storytelling and upgrading will happen in this city that we've created that's called Castle Rahu. And Castle Rahu is kind of her home base. And much like we were talking about Red and Lex having this home base to refer back to as this thread to weave through the story, that's exactly what we're going to be doing with Shadow of the Moon. And so imagine in Groundhog Day if Bill Murray was able to actually interact with other people while still being locked in this cyclical pattern. And if you, imagine you, let's say you wake up and every other morning you repeat the same time and you try to tell someone about it, no one will believe you. And so she constantly is questioning her own sanity if this is really happening. And yet there are little hints peppered throughout her environment of Castle Rahu that signals to her that this is real. And so it's really in a lot of ways a psychological thriller where she's trying to understand really just like what the heck is going on in my world right now.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting back here like, okay, can I play it? Like, I'm set. Like, let's go. Like,
well, if anybody wants to help us make it, we have a Patreon account, and we gladly would accept any support, even $1. $1 a month will help us out, because we're doing everything we can to make innovative art for people. And again, whether it's through the written word, because we have novels, through graphic novels, blending the written word and visuals of 3D art, and then eventually into video games. We just want to make cool stuff and people to enjoy it. That's really it.
Well, it sounds like a great mission statement. We want to make cool stuff, and we just want people to enjoy it. I love that, man. I love the idea that you're trying to, in some sense, like, bootstrap each project by the success of the projects preceding it and how they can help support each other. Exactly. The idea of the Shadow of the Moon as a graphic novel to then kind of help fund the game, right?
100%. And by creating, no one would ever be able to create a graphic novel with those like fully fledged 3D assets that David and Carlos are using. Just as a graphic novel, it would be way too work intensive, and it wouldn't make sense on kind of a budgetary way. But because we can then use those same assets in a video game, we're able, our graphic novel, literally no one will ever have done anything like this before because it's too hard. The only way you'd ever be able to do it is if you were then going to make a video game out of it. But the only studios that are actually making video games like that are AAA or at least AAA indie studios. And our studio is small enough where we're in this very liminal stage where we can do enough of the video game now to create amazing art. And our writers and myself, we're good enough to write the story out and present it in a very compelling way where we can then hopefully use it as a proof of concept to say like, hey, check this out. If you like this, imagine like living it, imagine playing it for real. And if you like that, back it on Kickstarter. Like, believe in us, please. Like, we've proven to you guys through The Last Amazon, we've proven to you guys through the Red Opera RPG, and we've proven to you guys through Shadow of the Moon graphic novel. Now come out in droves and throw some cash at us so we can eat some food while we make this game for you.
Please, just
let them have more than ramen.
Exactly. Ramen's good though. I do. Shin Ramen is really the Korean version. I've never had that. It's amazing.
I'm gonna tell my wife now because she's a big ramen fan.
It's
always
spicy.
something to consider.
You've been warned. It's a little spicy.
That's
Shin
okay.
Ramen.
She's a spicy freak, no problem about that. In fact, I'm the weakling when it comes to it. I'm always like, no, unless you want to see me turn into a human just sweat ball. Like, please, just keep it away, keep it away.
It's mildly spicy, Seth. You'd be okay, I promise.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll think about it. How about that? I'll keep a cold glass of milk handy. Kendra, I can't remember. Is it you or me? Did I follow up with a question? Did I take a question? Did I give a question? Are you up next? Was it me?
I think it's you.
Okay. So I want to come back around to Red Opera in a minute. But there's something that's been kind of picking at my brain, and it's like, look, man, don't let this go until you've had a chance, because one of the things you guys were mentioning earlier, and this is probably 30 minutes ago or so, but it stuck with me, was about the way that you revealed the quality of sort of the development that we get to see for Lex as we're progressing through. Her recovery of her memory is progressing along with us, which is a great measurement. But you also have a couple of other measurement tools in here that sort of like develop through the process of the story. And one that I was really intrigued by because of how important it is for so many different elements of the story is the redacted and then finally revealed Foxglove document.
Yes.
I feel like this is a really foundational component because of how it's used first in the introduction in Denver, then later as other parts are revealed, and then when we finally get actually the full document. Now, we've been putting the pieces together, but when you guys are creating this story, how did this piece find its way to fit? Where did it come into play? Because I thought it was really important when you guys were recognizing some of the other elements. It's like, if we introduce it here, we have to show its progression throughout the book Tell me how that process was with this document.
Yeah, absolutely. So a good friend of mine, Rick Hines, he's actually the lead writer on The Red Opera, our upcoming book. He gave me a piece of advice from my first novel, Rooney the Apprentice. He said, if you do anything like this, always do it in the rule of three. It was in reference in my first book, I had only 2 dream sequences. And he's like, if you're going to do something once or twice, at least do it 3
The
times.
threes. That sounds like such an old classics thing, right? Like,
I know,
good things come in threes, bad things come in 3.
Exactly. So it's like, okay, we got to at least do 3. So thank you, Rick Hines. I listen to your feedback. I truly do. David and I wanted to have a reveal at the end. My greatest regret of The Last Amazon is I feel it's too short. It just is what it is. We already added an additional 36 pages, David, I think, over the Kickstarter. So I think we originally only told people it would be, I don't know, whatever 36 pages minus the total was. And we just swallowed the difference on that. We budgeted it out on our Kickstarter to be, whatever it was. And we didn't include, we didn't add any additional price on it when we put it out to market. We said we stand behind our word. We're going to give you guys the best product that we can. We feel that it needs to be longer. It still isn't long enough. It still begs for more, but we'll just do it in a sequel. So my greatest regret is I wish that we could have added more, but we still added a whole third of the book. Regardless, we wanted to have this very powerful reveal, and so we then needed to have an evolution where we didn't give away too much. And so I wrote out the final version, and we went back and forth for like months on how much of this do we redact and how do we redact it. And a lot of times, and this is just the brilliance of David, I'd say, all right, man, like, here you go, make it look cool. Like, it's now your turn to like make it awesome, buddy. I look forward to talking more tomorrow once you have a draft.
I think for those pages, I really print out like 5 pages of those, and I redact them by hand. And then like a couple of ones, I shred them and paste them with tape. And this is what you see in the book. There are actual photos of me taking those versions of the redacted files. I still have
real
them
because it is.
I still have them in a little folder, like all completely shredded.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Life is art, art is life. And here's the other thing that catches me there. I wanted to follow up with you about that. Was there ever a point where you were looking at it, where you almost wanted to turn around to Jamison and go, hey, man, could you write this with certain words in certain places? Because when you black certain things out, it looks cooler. I mean, was there ever a visual part where you're looking at what's been written, and as you're blacking sections out, was there ever a visual take on that, where you were looking at what you were blacking out and what visual image that created?
I don't.
It did. So I remember. It did. So
I got
there
lucky.
were times. No, you were totally right. It was hard to write it like that. So there were times where when you redact stuff, it's like your imagination can fill in the gaps. And so I remember going back and we looked at some of the redactions and we're like, this is not super compelling. Like, it doesn't, like, it's kind of like whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And so I remember one time being like, David, okay, like if you were to just be able to have black bars here for redacted, like to space it out, like where would we do it? And I remember you came back with a version and I was like, that looks a lot better than what I did. And so and it was kind of then like David then turning to me to be like, all right, Jamison, now you got to make it work. Like, it looks cool now you got to do your job. And it's not easy writing something knowing that certain parts are going to be removed, but then having it when you read the whole like totality of it, have it make sense still and like be this big payoff. It was a big piece of it. There was a lot there. Another little Easter egg, the model that we used for the full like top secret U.S. government file, reveal. David, who is that model for?
Oh, it's my wife.
Yeah.
It's my wife, yeah. I have a small anecdote for that. There's this character, which is the detective. I think I have it here in the book. I don't remember.
Fosher, right? I think.
Fosher, yes. So you clearly see the picture of someone, and he was actually my my first client ever since I finished college and then university, and then I came to Paris, and I was working with these DJs and trying to build my portfolio. And he was my first. He's a rapper now. He's doing other stuff, but at the time he was a rapper, and I was making covers for him. And then I think it was, I don't remember why we decided to have him, but I was like, we were looking for a professional photo, and he had this one. I was like, hey dude, can you give me a photo of you? He was like, okay, but I didn't tell him for what it was. He knew that I was doing a book, but he didn't saw anything. And I think it was last year, around September, almost a year ago, he came here at my house, and I showed him the first time the book. And he wasn't counting on it. And when he turned the page, he saw his face, his picture. It was like, oh my God, I was not expecting this.
and Fosher is actually, he's our only male protagonist in the story, because we have 3 female protagonists. And so Fosher is like really actually the only male protagonist. For our outlines for the sequel, at least, he plays a very major character. So yeah, it was
his friend, I think. His friend.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. Right. That guy's, so within storytelling, we use him as a prop to make Fosher look good, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
So he's like sidekick.
That's awesome. I love that story. Okay. I feel like I've added a couple of follow-up questions. Kendra, I'm totally passing the mic back. You ask like 5. I totally, I'm okay with it.
At this point, it's becoming a conversation. So I'm fine with letting the rigmarole of me or you go. But
thank you.
I would love to hear from both of you. What was your favorite part of The Last Amazon?
Wow, what a great question. David, you go first.
I really like the social media part, because I remember that we had a lot of fun doing those.
Yeah, those are awesome.
I think the parts that I like the most are the parts related to the experience of making them, the Amazons and the Amazons. I also like the first person ones, where Danish is like completely shredding those Amazons. And the last part with that green look, remember Jamison when we saw
that one's so great. Yeah,
the green look.
Darth Lexi. Yeah,
exactly.
That's really good. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna sound like super corny and cheesy. My favorite part of The Last Amazon was working with David. And I know that sounds silly. I know it sounds bad, but like it's really the truth. I wrote my first book by myself. A novelist is a lonely life. And working with David on this project, honestly, like brings even like a little tear to my eye. We were 2 young men who were just crazy. We should not have done this. David's working another job. I'm working another job. And, he's waking up super early to go do his job. I have to wake up super early to do my job. And I even had like for some of it, even had like a, young baby at the time. And
wow.
Yeah, dude, right? Yeah,
I remember we were like on a call with the webcam, and I saw he was kind of like balancing his body, like was left and right. I was like, what are you doing, man? And he was with his right foot trying to make her baby sleep.
Yeah, I was rocking my daughter in her little crib, like her little car seat crib, so she'd go to sleep. And to have someone that I could mind share with, and as a writer and as a director, to be like, this is my vision, this is what I see, how can you make this real and actually visualize it for real? And to have the trust there, and there's ups and downs, and there are times we got mad at each other, but now after working together for years, us working together for the Red Opera, our current book, and for Shadow of the Moon, that's my favorite piece, and I love The Last Amazon. But whenever I think back on it, it's always our crazy phone calls and trying to make stuff work. That is by far my favorite part of it.
Yeah,
I don't want to make the cheese factor go up anymore, but I've got a huge
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
But I mean, you're in good company. I mean, Seth, you and I can both speak to it. I mean, if you don't have a good relationship with your colleagues, where it's much deeper than being a colleague, it shows. I mean, it shows in the work you do and what you produce. You see the love and the passion, and that's definitely something that's very apparent in the projects I'm seeing.
Without question, I can totally relate. I actually was lucky enough to work on the story side of a video game a few years back, and there were times when it worked, and it was only because people were all collaborating, everyone was contributing, and then there were other times where it was just like, we all need a break.
Yeah,
I don't care if it's a week or two, but everyone needs to go and do some writing or take a vacation or go on a bender, whatever you got to do. And then all come back, and it was a process. Like sometimes it was, you get a group call in a couple hours, you're just all writing at the same time, and other times where it was just like, anything, not really. Okay, we're gonna come back to this. Okay, let's everybody have a plan, let's have a goal, and then come back to it. And it's a relationship. Like sometimes you love that other person, and sometimes you're like, why am I in this? What? So that's just from my experiences in collaboration. It's great, and other times it's you trying to get back to when it was great.
Totally.
I think that can come down to I think in every project there is the best times and the worst times. But I think and I've been finding this like from The Last Amazon, it's really in those times that we learn the best experiences that we come out when we come out of those let's say not less good experiences, and then leverage those experiences, learning from them, and then applying them into the future projects. So now every time there's kind of like a less good experience, I'm like, okay, well, what can I learn from this? What can I improve here? And it's really in a like humbling, let's say, humbling theme.
Agreed. No, it's usually the point where you're like, okay, so what do we got to take away from this? Because we clearly, there's a problem that's here, but the solution we uncover, that's going to be the important part. And also seeing how it was we got here, and if it's something we can either A, avoid, or B, if it's something that's part of the friction. That's how you get a fire going. Like if you're rubbing two sticks together, it's not fun at first, but you keep at it. That's how you get the spark. Kendra, I know you have more questions. I don't want to go into mine if you've got any burning.
I think I have just for right here and now. I have one that's at the top of my tongue.
Go.
So let's strip away the fact that there was the nuclear apocalypse, and you guys are given the choice of either being in the hydroponics world of the Denver denizens, or being in the tropics with Hawaii's Azores Islands. Seeing as both of you know what lies underneath both of them, where would you go?
Man, it's a hard question. I've had a lot of people ask. I've had a lot of people ask. David, you go first.
It's funny because for me it's the first time that someone asks me. I think in Denver because the Azores Islands are kind of like we one of the things was to create this contrast between the cities, the two places, and I think right now we are kind of living in Azores, let's say in the society that we have where everything looks so beautiful. Look, we have like all of these beautiful things that you can consume, but underneath, like, well, what's happening, like phones are listening to us, And in Denver, they are kind of like trying to build, like, it's a restart button. It's like, let's try to restart this and see where it goes. So yeah, I think Denver would be my choice.
I totally agree with you, and I have one thing to add. So Rex Enton, who's a character in our book, he created the first hydroponics setup within the Denver Denizen community. The model that we use for that is my brother, Alex Benton. So Rex Enton, Alex Benton. I'm going to give it a little spoiler. It's not that big of a one. Rex Enton becomes the president of Denver, of the Denver Denizen. So he gets elected within our timeline for the sequel. This is not a huge spoiler, but he becomes a president. And so I don't know. I assume having your brother being president would be a good thing. I'm not I don't know if that's true. My brother, I think he likes me. I mean, I put him in my book, so hopefully he likes me. But I figure that's got to do something for me, having him as the leader of the Denver Denizens. Yeah, I would go Denver. I'd like to visit Azores Island. We tried to really take a look at some like income inequality, looking at, just like greed, corporate greed. I mean, as you like the, Loch Bay Monster, like the Loch Ness Monster, as you said, of like, what would happen if Monsanto, Nestle, Lockheed Martin, and Bay Industries all got together and had this like grotesque Frankenstein of genetic engineering weaponry. Like, what would happen? Probably not good things. You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah, and it clearly invites the possibility, right? Like, oh, so where can this go wrong? Well, let's explore what all those might be. Exactly. Great question, Kendra.
Hey, I'm just excited. I got a spoiler. I don't care how small it was. It's there.
Shout out to Alex Benton outside of Boston, Massachusetts. I miss you, bro.
Oh. And this episode even has a little bro love. All right. Hey, just for fun, because I said I wanted to come around back to it. Now that you've told us so much about the Amazons, Last Amazon, I wanted to just, kind of look at what you were saying was coming out in the not so distant future with Red Opera. What can you tell us about what's coming our way, the RPG, and what its roots are? Are you both RPG players? Is this new territory for you? Talk about this project that we're learning more about.
We are so incredibly thrilled about this. So I grew up on what's called Theater of the Mind tabletop RPGs. And so this is things like Vampire the Masquerade, Mage the Ascension, White Wolf games, things like Shadowrun. And I played a lot of D&D too, but I always kept on coming back to this theater of the mind. I enjoy, really, min-maxing characters on character sheets. But and I played, Warhammer 40K back in the day, so obviously that's more of like a grid tile system. But what we wanted to do with the lead writer, Rick Hines, who's an amazing both author and also game master and storyteller, was create within 5th edition, so 5e, and that's more of a Dungeons and Dragons term. It's their open source kind of rule book settings and rules. So we don't have, and many people will make 5th edition campaign settings and campaign modules. Wizards of the Coast were really very great about saying like, hey, you know what? We have this awesome thing called Dungeons and Dragons. The community is amazing. Use our 5th edition rules. We're not going to sue you if you use the rules. So thank you, Wizards. We appreciate that. Definitely don't want to get sued by you. And so we set out to do something again, and this is kind of the Apotheosis Studios motto, to do something that no one has ever done before. And so we collaborated with a amazingly talented heavy metal rock band called Dia Morte. Drake Mephisto, their lead, founder and lead, is also a gamer, also a just very avid geek and fan of kind of geeky things like us. And funny enough, how this book came about, Drake Mephisto, again, lead singer, and lead of this heavy metal rock band, Dia Morte, was at Rick Hines, a very good friend of mine, at his house in Chicago, and saw The Last Amazon on Rick's on his coffee table, and said, excuse my profanity, I don't know how like kid friendly this is. I won't swear. I'll just says, what the F is this? And Rick goes, this is like one of the coolest graphic novels I've ever seen, written by a good friend of mine. Take a look. And Drake picked it up and just fell in love with it. Rick then, and this was over probably about a year and a half ago, said, hey, we'd love to do a D&D campaign module and setting, and we'd love for Apotheosis Studios to take the lead on it. What would that entail? And I was like, man, I don't even know. We'd have to talk about it for months and months and months and months and months. And we did. And we then all collaborated, and we've created the first time ever this partnership between a heavy metal rock band where these Dia Morte uses incredibly elaborate stage props. Now with COVID, things have been kind of difficult for them, but stage props for their performance, where it's really a rock opera, and a la the Red Opera, the name of this campaign setting. And so the lore and the story around their characters in their rock opera, we then were able to take that with Rick Hines and create this entire D&D campaign module and setting. My team, David and Carlos and I, we then created an entire city, just like we did with Shadow of the Moon, where we can take these amazing vista shots. The art in this book is, no one has ever done anything like this before. There's a reason for it. It's just kind of absurd of how beautiful it is. People can check out right now. We have our Kickstarter trailers up. It's at theredopera.com, and you can take a look at the amazing art that David and the rest of the artists have done. And the storytelling for an RPG setting is fantastic. So one of the things that we've been really trying to focus on is, what is it like when people who grew up on this stuff, on fandom, starts making it? Everyone else really, they didn't grow up on it. So none of these other content creators, whether it's comics, video games, or anything, unless you're a millennial, you didn't grow up on it. And I'm sorry, boomers, like, it just isn't how it works. And so now that we have millennials actually creating stuff, it's radically different. And in my mind, I think a huge step in the right direction. So it's probably a very long-winded answer. I'm very passionate about this project, so I'm sorry for monologuing. But redopera.com, we launched September 1st. Last thing, and then I will shut my mouth, is I'm so sorry. It's centered around warlocks. So the warlock class within D&D lore is, I think, the most interesting class. I play warlocks. I love warlocks. They are super complicated. And if you're a warlock, and a warlock lover, you know how awesome they are. But if you're not, and let's say you play a fighter or a paladin or a druid or a ranger or whatever, they're always this class, which is kind of weird. And a lot of times people will feel a little sad because warlocks get to have all the fun with their DM where they're talking to their patron. That's how warlocks get their power. They kind of like give a little shard of their soul in exchange for power, where a wizard will go to some arcane academy and will learn, fireball, for example. A patron will be like, here's some of my soul, make me powerful. Within our story, Rick Hines has created it in such a way that anyone, literally anyone, can make a pact with the patron. This has never been done before. And this whole city that's called the Shadelands that we created for this project is a city ruled by warlocks and patrons. Never done before in D&D lore. There's never been a campaign module like this. And the players actually have the ability to shape the future of the Shadelands. And so we have multiple endings within our books. And your party can, as a GM, they can run through this and they can decide how the story unfolds and the fate of the Shadelands. Again, never been done by Wizards of the Coast or anyone else. And so we are so excited for September 1st when we launch on Kickstarter and can share this awesome, hopefully pillar of D&D, lore with the world.
That was pretty good. I think you probably could have gone a little more in depth. No,
I'm so sorry. I know I talk too much. I'm so sorry.
Man, you were great. And actually, it's the one thing my wife says about me all the time. Like, why is it whenever I hear you doing a podcast, I only hear you talking? What's going on? And I'm sorry. Oh no, man, I'm just giving you a hard time. Actually, that was perfect, and I love your approach to it. Also, I love that you're focusing in on the warlock class, and also I'm immediately drawn to how I've really been encouraged by the fact that I've seen so many different takes on some of these same ideas. I mean, you're reminding me of the things that I've seen like Kieran Gillen do with Die. And more recently, when we're talking about Last Amazon, it reminds me of things I've seen in like Undiscovered Country from Scott Snyder, or the more recent Protector books. These are all taking looks at these ideas, and those are the only ways I've been able to view them currently. But with your projects, I now have a chance to take a lot of these same ideas I've enjoyed in comics and view them through the projects you described, which is, for me, a pretty awesome experience. And man, I'm gonna make that personally my last question, because we've had you on for over an hour and a half, and I've just been loving everything you've been telling us. With that being my last one, Kendra, I'm happy to offer it up to you if you have a final question or another question or more questions.
I'm actually in the same boat. I mean, mine's more of a statement than anything. I mean, please don't ever apologize for either of your passions. I mean, that's really why we wanted you guys on the show. This is not only a one-of-a-kind book, but you're basically just stealing into my wallet with the rest of these projects, because as soon as you said Vampire the Masquerade, I'm done.
Excellent. If you like Vampire the Masquerade, you're I like want to swear so badly, but I won't. You're gonna love the heck out of this.
But I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you guys are, like you said it yourself, and you said it beautifully. You're touching on things, you're reinventing the genres, and I mean, you're succeeding from the standpoint that I've seen just with the Last Amazon. You're succeeding in droves, every bit, both of you. I mean, this was an astounding. Josh did not prepare us properly for what this book was going to be. And I'm so glad that he didn't, because it is an experience unto itself. It is a one of a kind. And for our listeners, if you get the chance, go to the Facebook page. I've shared it online. Go there. Go look at it. Look at all of the amazing art. I plan on getting a signed copy of the hardback, and I cannot wait to see not only Shadow of the Moon, but the Red Opera. I mean, I'm down. You guys, I am. Absolutely, take my money. Take it all.
Kendra, I'm right there with you. Hey guys, keeping that in mind, since this is pretty much the wrap up here, where can everyone find you? How can they reach out to you guys? Social media, any other ways you like to be contacted? Jamison, I'll start with you, and then we'll move to David, to you next. But where can folks find you? What can they do to reach out and let you know what they think, sing your praises, tell you?
Totally. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Patreon, at Apotheosis Studios. Additionally, if people want to go directly to our content, they can go to thelasamazon.com. And if they want to go directly to the Red Opera, just theredopera.com. And if they want to have a little sneak peek of Shadow of the Moon, shadowofthemoon.com. Those all will link back to our website, which is apotheosisstudios.com. We have our core team comprised of artists and writers. They're all there. And so if you then want to learn more about Carlos, for example, and his work, you can click on the link on the team bios page. If you enjoy reading fantasy novels, you can learn about Rune of the Apprentice, which was my first book. And if you want to learn more about David, you can click on his bio too. And we just want to create cool stuff and share it with the world.
David, how about you? Is there any other places where folks can find you? Any other ways of contact we need to let them know about?
Oh, it's exactly the same for to find me. It's in Apotheosis Studio. And in the team bios, you'll find the link for the art station, and that mostly through what Jamison already said, through Apotheosis Studio for sure.
Perfect. Sounds like one direct line gets you everything you need. I like it. Kendra, I'm going to go ahead and let people know where they can find you.
You're going to let them know? Do it, Seth. You've heard me say
No, I'm going to let you let them know. Get out of the way.
Oh, goodness. All right. If the good people want to find me, they can find me on Facebook. I'm Kendra Hale. I can be found on Twitter at Devour All Words. And you can also find me on darkknightnews.com doing news and reviews for all things Harley Quinn and DC related, as well as on these podcasts every week. Seth, where can the bad people find you?
Well, for the most part, you're going to find me fumbling with my mute button, which has been a curse at least once or twice during this conversation, but really only made its like sort of evil presence felt that last moment there. Otherwise, find me at DC Comics News. Find me online. I'm on Twitter as One More Singleton. As far as DC Comics News, please keep in mind you can find this podcast and all of our episodes by making sure that you've subscribed on whatever your favorite podcast platform is, whether it's Google, Spotify, iTunes, Breaker, you name it. When it comes to social media, we're at DC Comics News. That's at capital D, capital C, capital COMICS, capital NEWS. Whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, YouTube, you name it. And with that keeping in mind, there's only one thing we like to ask you to do, and that is to always
read
more
comics.
Awesome. This has been the DC Comics News weekly podcast. I have been lucky enough to hang out with Jamison Stone, David Ferrer, the amazing Kendra Hale. Guys, if you haven't done it yet, look for The Last Amazon. We gave you all the best reasons why. All you got to do is find it. Thanks, guys. By the way, thank you for doing this with us. Thank you for making this such a great conversation. Thank you both.
Yes, thank you.
And I want to say to you guys, thank you so much for seeing what like the hard work that we poured into this. It's music to our I was gonna say music to our ears. It's music to our hearts, man. Honestly.
Exactly.
So thank you guys.
Hey man,
Seriously.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's the best thing about being on a podcast is getting a chance to have this conversation and share your guys' work. It's our pleasure. It's honestly our pleasure. I can't think of a better note to end on. Thanks, everybody. Stick around next time.
Bye.